Thank you, everyone. My name is Patrick Osia. And as Prof has rightly stated, this is a co-project, myself and me and him. So what we are looking at today is on critical policy challenge and possibility for integrated migration management in Southern Africa. And it's interesting some of the points that was raised in the order in the just concluded session, and some mindsets that was that was the background to the arguments that were made. Some of the things in which we'll be raising. So for us, it's more or less a scoping analysis as well as coming up with just policy advice as relating to what we need to do. So first, it's just a background now, just for us to agree to the fact that when it comes to the discourse on human migration, it has been a critical component of the history of man. It has been a critical component of development over time that we are familiar with, and we understand the push and pull factors that goes alongside migration, the reasons for migration, conflicts, climate change, environmental stress, political uncertainty, economic strife, underdevelopment in some areas, and the likes are some of the push and pull factors that we are all familiar with. And then we're also familiar with the fact that, okay, educational possibility is also another reason for people moving from one place to the other. And within the continent of Africa, it's also pertinent to note that 67% of African migration has been intra-African movements. That's what it is. It's more intra-African movement as against inter-movement, as in moving out of the continents as it is. So if a large chunk of the population in Africa move within the space of Africa, it becomes important for us to look at this issue as it is. And we just felt, okay, for us to critically understand, to critically look at migration policy and migration management in Africa, there has to be an understanding of the migration challenge in Africa. That's the historical analysis of the migration challenge in Africa. And when it comes to the discourse of the migration challenge in Africa, we are familiar with the fact that when we talk about colonization, in most cases, people feel that the issue of colonization has been overflowed. But our history is our history, and they say that the popular saying is history that is unknown is doomed to repeat itself. And when we discuss the discourse on migration, it's also very important, especially within the concept of African migration. It's important for us to remember the origin of African states and the pivotal role the Berlin Conference of 1884-85 played in African nationalism and what we refer to as states in Africa now. And the border creation that was created in Africa outside the consultation with Africans. And now, one of the panelists in the last conversation came from the argument of we have done a lot. And that's a statement that was made. We have done a lot. The perception of us and them, we and them, it all aligns back to the Berlin Conference, the mistakes or the engineering of the Berlin Conference that led to the states that we have in Africa. And this again can be traced with the whole issue of the concept of foreigners and indigenes as it is. In as much as we can narrow down to say that the reasons for conflict the reason for most conflicts are resource-based. But again, the issue of some certain people seeing themselves as originally inhabitants of a particular place in Africa goes back to this. And the border issues in Africa also goes back to the Berlin Conference. So now I see myself as a Nigerian, another person seeing himself as a South African, and a Namibian, a Congolese, and the likes, all as a result of the border that was created within this space. And that trickles down to the contemporary perception in which we see ourselves. Our identity is now conditioned by the Berlin Conference, and that speaks on the issue of macro nationalism when we start seeing ourselves on the premises of this border, and then movement within this angle is also attached to this, and then that itself leads to border issues as it speaks. And it's interesting, for instance, when you look at when there are border disputes in Africa, we go back to the colonial heritage. For instance, a recent example would be the Nigerian-Cameroon border dispute. It was resolved by looking at the colonial borders that was created within the premise of the Berlin Conference and itself. So it speaks to our nationalism, our macro nationalism, and then the issue of border movements as it is in Africa. So the argument we are making here is to say that for us to, if we agree to the fact that migration has been part of human history and it's pivotal for the development in Africa, then we need to look at it again and understand what is the problem exactly when it comes to migration and migration policies in Africa, and then what do we do about it? And for us, decolonizing the African border seems to be the way forward, whereby we have an African-centered discourse as relating to that. So decolonizing the African border is the way to go, because that is what it is. And then we tend to look at what are the current migration challenges in Africa. When you look at the African Union, the ECOWAS, for example, regional organizations in Africa, ECOWAS, SADC, and the likes, the first thing we come to realize is the non-integration of the migration policies in Africa. The regional bodies, the continental body as African Union, the regional bodies, ECOWAS, and even the migration policies of each state. For instance, when you look at, of which I will be discussing SADC after now, but when you look at ECOWAS as an example, you realize that one of the fundamental objectives of ECOWAS is to ensure economic integration of the whole of West African states. But you realize that the policies in ECOWAS, as we will discuss also in SADC, you realize that state policies are counterproductive as relating to the regional policy of integration. So there's the policy seems to be parallel to each other. So the integration itself is lacking when it comes to that. And then we talk about one of the challenges within the migration policy here is the non-alignment in the migration management between the regionals and the state body. There's no alignment when it comes to the management there. While the regional bodies talks about the need for integration, the need of free movement of people and goods, you realize that each state have different policies as relating to the free movement of people and goods for obvious reasons. And it's also trickled down to the ideology of the regional policies, which are on liberalism, and which is opposing to the state policies that talks about securitization, that talk about the fact that, okay, we need to close our borders, we need to restrict the movement of people within our borders for many obvious reasons. So basically, these are the migration policy, the migration challenge we have in the entirety of Africa. And so it speaks in any region you want to come up, in Eastern Africa, in Northern Africa, in Southern Africa, Western Africa, the same issue flies around in those places. So when we look at South Africa as a case, Southern Africa as a case, we're familiar with the countries in Southern Africa, of which we have the Angola, South Africa, Swaziland, Lesotho, Madagascar, and the like, Zambia, Zimbabwe. The entirety of the Southern African states. The first thing we notice that comes to play is the fact that there are irregularities when it comes to movement, and the movement seems to be asymmetric in the sense that there are hotspots, quote and unquote, where migration is at the highest. People tend to move to some regions or some states in Southern Africa. So first is the fact that while there are internal migration within Southern Africa, There are also people coming from outside the region into the hotspots, quote unquote, hotspots states as South Africa. You have South Africa, you have Botswana and Namibia as the hotspot states in which the attraction is on these states in Southern Africa. And you realize that since the 1990s, there's been an increase in the migrants that have moved down to this area. And when with this increase, like I've raised, the background to conflicts, like we say, is resources. Resources has always been the reason. It might be masqueraded in the sense of nationalism or religious fight or ethnic fight and everything, but resources comes to play. And with the movement of people in this place, we understand the fact that there's a pressure on the resources in these states, as we mentioned. So these are the obvious in Southern Africa. And then when it comes to the migration policy, the policy challenge in Southern Africa, we're familiar with the SADC declaration in 1992 that consolidated cultural links, that talk about the fact that there has to be a reinforcement of cultural and historical affinity of the people of Southern Africa. There has to be a reinforcement of that. And for that reason, there was the SADC instrument that's to achieve this, which was adopted in 2005. But coincidentally or unfortunately, only 6 of the 15 SADC member countries have ratified this protocol. It goes back to speak on the arguments we make as relating to liberalism that the regional bodies talk about, and the non-alignment of this policy when it comes to the state body. So you realize that only 6 of the 15 member states, the SADC member states, have actually enforced this rule. And then, like we said, prior to the 1995 draft, the 1993 SADC protocol workshop also come up with the 1995 protocol on free movement of persons in SADC, which was supposed to be a visible plan in 10 years. So technically, between 1995 and 2005, that should have been implemented. But we realize that that is not the case. So the question is, why do we have these disparities when it comes to the migration protocol? It goes back to speak on the economic disparities within these states, the development in these states not being even, which is typical. They are not evil. And then, like we said, most of these SADC states, where they adopt a neoliberal policies, where they adopt neoliberal policies and approach to economic management, free movement of people and goods as a state, but the cross-border migration within these states seems to be more and more or less securitized. So basically, in simple terms, we say that while the idea of free movement of people and goods is on policy, but the practical reality is that this is not what it is as in reality. So for us, we said, okay, the recommendation that we can come up with as relating to this is to say, okay, first there has to be more consultation. And yes, as we have listened to in the previous session, there has to be more consultation as to how do we ratify this issue. And in this consultation, we need to ask ourselves, what exactly will migration entail going forward? We understand the fact that our borders might have been a colonial creation, but how do we move on going forward? When we talk about free movement, who should move and what should move? That needs to be clear, both in theory as well as in practical reality. That's both in the policy that are enacted and as well as the implementation of those policies. We need to discuss who and what should move. And then there has to be a full commitment of all member states towards migration policy integration of all states. And for us, we're also looking at the South African Custom Union as a template for when we discuss the policy integration in the Southern African region. That can be a policy laboratory for us to look at on having a borderless Southern Africa. As we note, the main objective of the South African policy custom union is the establishment of free and economic integration of the region. So that templates can become what can be used going forward in ensuring the integration of both policy and management of migration in the South African region. So I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. Thank you so much for enticing us and challenging us in terms of policy